Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra 2 Unit 4.4, 4.5 Review B. Remember to show every single step and to write your answers on the lines. Okay, so please note the difference between these three. So before we get started, we have three different little problems to review and solve. So A, we have 6 plus or minus the square root of 24 divided by 2. So what do? We take the square root of 24 and we want to break it down into perfect squares. Well, what are the perfect squares? Well, 1 squared, 2 squared, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it keeps going. Okay? So, what perfect square goes into 24? Well, that would be 4, and then what would be left over is 6. So the square root of 4 is 2, square root 6. So after we break it down, then we plug it back in. So 6 plus or minus 2 square root 6, all divided by 2. All right, and then we break it down. 6 divided by 2 plus or minus 2 square root 6 divided by 2, and then we simplify that. 6 divided by 2 is 3, plus or minus. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we just have the square root of 6 left over. And that's it. All right, letter B. So once again, we need to look inside the square root. What does the square root tell us? Well, the first thing that I see is that there's a negative, and whenever there's a negative, there's an I. So now I have I square root 4. Well, 4 is a perfect square, so when I take the square root, it's just going to be 2, but then I can't forget about the I. So we have x equals 6 plus or minus 2I divided by 2, and then we're going to do that same thing. 6 divided by 2 is 3 plus or minus 2I divided by 2 is just I. Oh, sorry, I'm going to write that in black. Now, if you're like, whoa, Mr. Grice, I can't believe, I don't know how you did that. Well, let me just show you one more time. Okay. Sorry, I want to make sure that I is my final answer. The red, we have 6 divided by 2, and then plus or minus. In the blue, it's 2I divided by 2. So we get 3 plus or minus I. Okay. And another thing that could happen is, well, when we look at it, it just ends up being a perfect square, and we have x equals 6 plus or minus 2 divided by 2. And you're like, oh man, I don't know how to do that. Well, we would break it up to the two answers. 6 minus 2 divided by 2, and 6 plus 2 divided by 2. Well, 6 minus 2 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is, good, 2. So we get x equals 2, and then 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So when it breaks up into whole numbers like this, that means we could have factored something and we just didn't do it. Okay? So solve each quadratic equation by using an appropriate method, either factoring or the quadratic formula. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. We need to look at our leading coefficients, and then we always move the smaller one. So these all cancel, and then we get that 0 equals x squared plus 10x plus 24. Okay, so we should always look what numbers multiply to get to 24 and add to get to 10. And if you don't know, you should just be writing down 24, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And the combination that works is 4 and 6. So I would then split that middle term to get x squared plus 4x plus 6x plus 24. Factor out the x, factor out the 6. We get x plus 4, x plus 4. That just means we factored it correctly. So I have x plus 4 and x plus 6 equal to 0. Don't forget about this equal to 0 part, okay? Sorry, and that one was x plus 6. So now everything with the variable we set equal to 0. So x plus 4 equal to 0, x plus 6 equal to 0, and we get that x equals negative 4, and x equals negative 6. Okay, so what we do with that is I'm going to write my final answer right here. Negative 6 and negative 4. I always put those answers in order from least to greatest. Okay, but I'm also going to put them up on the line right here. So we've got negative 6 and negative 4. Okay. All right, next one. All right, look at your leading coefficients. And once again, we're going to move the smaller one. Everything on the right side cancels, and we get 36m squared. Oh, negative 4, or positive 4m minus 4m, those cancel. Okay, so we had 36m squared minus 25. Now, after you look for GCF, I noticed that both of those numbers are perfect squares, okay? So that means I can factor this by taking the square root. The square root of 36m squared is 6m. The square root of 25 is 5, and 1's a positive, and 1 is a negative. Okay? And then, once again, everything with the variable you set equal to 0. I would subtract the 5 and divide by 2. Add the 5, divide by 2. So we get our answer of negative 5 over 6 and 5 over 6. Perfect squares are nice because you can solve those ones fairly quickly. Okay. So once again, I'm going to come up here and put my answer on the line. Okay. Well, there we go. So now I'm just going to add the 15x. I'm going to add the 15x, subtract the 4. We get 10x squared. Negative 3 plus 12, or sorry, negative 3 plus 15 is a positive 12x plus 3. Okay, so we're looking for numbers that multiply to get to 30, but add to get to 12. And 30 is 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Okay, and looking at that, there is no combination that works, so that means we're doing quadratic formula. So A equals 10, B equals 12, and C equals 3. Okay, so X equals the opposite of B, so it's 12, so it's a negative 12, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. Okay, so we've got 12A and then C, all divided by 2A. Okay, so we get X equals negative 12 plus or minus the square root, and we have 20 on the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and take out our calculators. And all I'm doing is writing what's underneath the square root. Okay, so that's 12 squared minus 4, was it times 10 times 3? And we get 24. Okay, just gonna move this over a little bit because now we have to break down 24. I'm not going to spend too much time on breaking down 24 because if you look at it, we already did it. So it's 2 square root 6. Okay, so we have X equals negative 12 plus or minus 2 square root 6, all divided by 20. Okay, and then we break it down. Negative 12 divided by 20 plus or minus 2 square root 6 divided by 20. Okay, and what do you get there? No, you should be able to do this. Okay, so negative 12 over 20, that ends up being negative 3 over 4 plus or minus 10, or 2 divided by 20 is going to be 1/10. So 6 over 10, and square root 6 over 10, apologies, is your final answer. Okay, so we have negative 3 over 4 plus or minus square root of 6 divided by 10. All right, number 4. All right, look at your square roots, or sorry, your square roots. Look at your leading coefficients, and then move the smaller one. And we're doing inverse operations. So we get 0 equals 5m squared minus 12m plus 10. Okay, so remember, we always want to check GCF and can I factor? Are there numbers that multiply to get to 20? Sorry, that's 50, because 5 times 10 is 50, and add to get to negative 12. Okay, so 50 is 1 and 50, 2 and 25, 3 no, 4 no, 5 and 10, and no, there's nothing. Okay, there's no GCF, so that means we're doing the quadratic formula. Okay, so once again, we take the opposite of B, it's a negative 12, so the opposite would be a positive, plus or minus the square root, B squared minus 4AC, all divided by 2A. Okay, so negative 12, 5, 10, and then down below we have a 5. Okay, so we have 12 plus or minus the square root, and on the bottom we have a 10. So this time, underneath the square root, we have negative 12 squared minus 4 times 5 times 10. And we get negative 56. Okay, so yeah, we got to break down the square root of negative 56. So the first thing I know is that there's going to be an I out front, and now we have to break up 56. Okay, so the highest root that goes into 56 or perfect square, I think it's 4. Yeah, 4 and 14 is the only combination. So we have I square root 4 square root 14, which turns into 2I square root 14. So we have 12 plus or minus 2I square root 14, all divided by 10. And then, yeah, we got to break that down. 12 over 10 plus or minus, and then we have 2I root 14 divided by 10. So we get our final answer of 12 over 10 is 6 over 5. 2 divided by 10, we get a 5 on the bottom, and then we have I root 14 as our final answer. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop right there, and that'll be our first video, and then we'll do another video on the back page. Okay? Any questions, please come see Ms. Carranza or myself. Otherwise, this is Mr. Grice signing off for Algebra 2, Unit 4.4, 4.5, Review B, Video 1. Thanks for watching.